everyone. Hey, great. Hi, my name is Mike Murdoch. I'm the Artistic Director of Alchemy Theater. Thank you all so much for being here. The 7th Annual West Virginia Shakespeare Festival here at Alchemy Theater's Geneva Kent Center for the Arts. The second year we've been able to have the Shakespeare Festival here in our building. We're very excited about that. And this year I am also excited to have another of my former professors coming to visit us to give our keynote speech. Vincent J. Cardinal is an accomplished director, writer, producer, and acting coach. Cardinal served as the artistic director of the Connecticut Repertory Theater, where he was recognized as one of the top 5 directors in the state by CBS WFSB Connecticut. He was also an associate artist with the Circle Repertory Company off-Broadway and director of the Circle Rep School of Theater. Cardinal holds a degree in playwriting from the Yale School of Drama, where he was honored with the ASCAP Cole Porter Award for Best Collected Work. His plays have been produced and performed internationally, including his play, The Colorado Catechism, which premiered at Circle Repertory Company and later went on to win Drama Logue Awards for Timothy Daly and Amy Van Nostrand in the Los Angeles production. Cardinal also directed the premiere of his play, King Dushyanta, a tale of Kalidasa, starring Tony Award winner Andre de Shields at the Oasis Theater Company. Throughout his career, Cardinal's directed over 90 productions across the country, including King Lear, starring Anthony Heald, and The Comedy of Errors by William Shakespeare, The Foreigner by Larry Shue, and Every Brilliant Thing by Duncan Macmillan, with Johnny Donahue at the Tony Award-winning Utah Shakespeare Festival. His production of Every Brilliant Thing was recognized as Production of the Decade by Broadway World. He has also directed numerous other productions and notable actors such as Terrence Mann in My Fair Lady and Man of La Mancha, Pat Sajak in The Odd Couple, and The Drowsy Chaperone, Steve Hayes in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Jerry Adler and Richard Klein in The Sunshine Boys, and Leslie Uggams in Gypsy. In addition to his work as a director, Cardinal is a successful producer, having led over 150 productions, including Les Mis with Terrence Mann and Ariana DeBose, Spam-A-Lot with Richard Klein, and The Music Man with Barrett Foa and Courtney Ballin. He has also served as the director of The Curious Case of Phineas Gage with the Split Knuckle Theater Company, which has been produced at various venues, including the New York International Fringe Festival. Cardinal is currently a professor at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance at the University of Michigan, where he previously served as the Arthur and Martha Herron Endowed Professor of Musical Theater and Chairman of the Department of Musical Theater. He has also held positions as the Chair of the Department of Dramatic Arts at the University of Connecticut, the Associate Dean of Performing Arts at Adelphi University, the Chair of Theater at the University of Miami, and the Artistic Director of the Jerry Herman Ring Theater. Additionally, he served as the Director of the School of Theater and Head of the MFA Playwriting Program at Ohio University, which is where I met him. Outside of his professional work, Cardinal serves on the Board of Directors for the Encore Musical Theater Company in Dexter, Michigan, where he recently directed Fun Home and the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, and will direct Bat Boy the Musical and The Importance of Being Earnest in the coming season, if this is an updated bio. So, he's a man that taught me a great deal about theater and helped find my love for theater in general. He taught me a great deal about playwriting and theater history, as well as acting, and I'm very, very, very honored and pleased to have him here with us. Vince Cardinal.
Thank you. I'm setting a timer because I'm a professor and we talk for 3 hours. And I'm not going to today. That's why it's time. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited. Thank you to Nora, Team Michael Murdoch. I appreciate it. I feel a lot of gratitude for being here, and I'm so aware that in the world in general, there's a lot of chaos and darkness. And we get to spend this time together talking about something fully wonderful, which is theater. And so thank you for joining and making me a part of it. This place is incredibly impressive. And I know when you're swimming in the water, you don't necessarily know how exciting what you have is. But this little oasis in this building and the efforts and everything that have happened to make this place, I hope you can feel as proud of it as I am excited about it. So congratulations to that. I did meet Mike in Ohio, in Athens, and I said last night, and I'll say it again, the thing that struck me so much about him was that he loved all aspects of theater like I love theater. And when people love it that much and they make it their life, it's magnetic. And I think that's part of, and I don't know Nora as well, but I think you're there also. And I think that's the magnet that creates this orbit, which is truly spectacular. So thank you, glad to be part of it. They asked me to speak for 30 minutes. I've set my alarm for 25, so I'll wrap it up when we hear the alarm. When they asked me to speak, I had no idea what to talk about. And I'm still not sure I do. But I had been on a phone call, actually a Zoom call that day with a former student who asked me what I think about when I'm directing Shakespeare. And I thought, well, it's a Shakespeare festival. I've directed a lot of Shakespeare. Maybe I should think about what I think about. And so that's what I'm going to talk about, is really what I think about as I'm preparing to direct shows, and I love that. And the first thing that I think about is the fact that when you read a play, you are doing the only thing the audience never does. They never see the words on the page. It's not what a theatrical experience is. So I read, but I think very viscerally about this blueprint that Shakespeare was creating and who he was creating it for. Imagine it's 1600, July, why not? And Queen Elizabeth I is on the throne. This is important because she's the theater queen. I mean, we all know a lot of theater queens, but she's the first one. And she loved theater, and that's really important because up to that point, really only prostitutes attended the theater, and they were looking for work. And she invited Shakespeare's company to the palace. She was a person who had her own theater company. I'm going totally tangentially. She had a group called the Queen's Men, and they were essentially a propaganda unit. And they would go to all the little towns and do shows and talk about how great she was. It fits into this because we know a little bit, and there's so little we know about Shakespeare, so mostly it's gossip, but I like to share that. The Queen's Men were touring. This is while Shakespeare was still at home with his wife. They had done a show at Oxford and gotten into a bar brawl, and one of the actors were killed. Their next stop was Stratford. And there's great conjecture that that's where Shakespeare joined the company that ended up getting him to leave his family and go to London to pursue his dream of being an actor. And of course, there was a plague there when he arrived. He was not forward thinking, just really smart. But I think that's kind of important as we look at who Shakespeare is and how he was experiencing theater, because he was experiencing theater first, even if he was only an audience member, that was done in the town square. That was very visceral. He was not what we think of with the Victorians, some sort of highfalutin, speaking in a funny voice and being precious about it. He was really there for the entertainment factor, and that was part of his survival and part of his DNA. What else can I tell you? So it's 1600, it's July, we decided to go to the theater. We probably don't know the title of the play. Can't read. We leave around lunchtime because the shows are either at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. And so we have to get from London across the Thames to where the theaters are. And we're either going to go on the bridge or we're going to take a boat. Probably we're saving money. And we're going to walk there, and then when it's a little darker and a little later, we'll take the boat back. Because it's kind of a dangerous trip. This is kind of a dodgy neighborhood we're going to. There's bear baiting, a lot of gambling going on, houses of prostitution, nicely called brothels, other theaters, but it's like going to Vegas without the family veneer. And you have to walk. So it's a place with a lot of distractions and a lot of assumptions about the kind of people who go there. There's a flag on the Globe Theater if there's a show going on. We probably know who Shakespeare is because we've seen a lot of his work at this point. It's kind of at the height of his fame. We probably know who Richard Burbage is because he's played great roles. Richard Burbage, by the way, and I'm thinking of Something Rotten, which is playing here. For those watching in the future, there is Something Rotten is playing at the moment. But the Bottom Brothers are really a send-up of James Burbage, who was the producer, and Richard Burbage, who's the actor. Richard Burbage played King Lear at 35. Which I just, we hand over Lear to these folks who are much, much older and expect them to do these acrobatics. And I think, it was written for a 35-year-old. Although I've done it with older actors and they're spectacular. We know the show's going to start because there's a loud gunshot. And that's your 5-minute warning to come inside. The thing is, Shakespeare has to capture the audience pretty quickly because there's not really that much reason to say it's cheap to go. It's for the groundlings, it was a penny. A penny is what an ale costs. So although it's still a penny, it is fairly cheap for the bulk of the people in the pit. It's a daytime performance, as I said. What I love about this is, sun is shining. We don't have any of this fabulous light stuff that we have here. But late in September, when they would do like Mackers, which is a scary play that I'm not allowed to say in the theater, they timed it out so that it was getting darker as the show progressed. And then when you saw that scary show, you had to walk back through the woods and across the bridge. So they made their own haunted house, which I just love. But it's July for us. The sun is shining, very bright. The audience is full. The theater attracts about 21,000 Londoners every week. That's over 10% of the city's population. Every week. It's part of living. It is not that one special thing we save up and go do. It's the fabric of our lives. I think that's a very different culture than the one we have now. 4% of Americans at this point in history go to the theater monthly, which actually is more than I thought. But that's in total. It's central to the role of the Renaissance culture, and it harkens back to the Greek culture, where democracy was born, and democracy depended on the population understanding empathy because it was ruled by consensus instead of from the top down. So the government decided we're going to pay for these great festivals. There will be dialogue. We'll see both sides of points of view. And sitting in the audience will be the baker and the senator, the richest person and the poorest person, and all of their perspectives will be honored. And that will birth a population who can vote with wisdom and with empathy and understand points of view that they don't agree with, but they can understand them. That's not what the Renaissance was intending to do, but it's what they did. And so even without intention, it was part of who they were. I know, I'm sounding like the history teacher. I'll get to the directing part in a minute. So we're inside the globe. The people I'm talking about are sitting in various places. There are the galleries, and that's where the middle class folks are, sea captains and clerks. They pay 2 to 6 pence. There are the gentlemen's rooms, which are where the rich people are, and probably women who are also wealthy, but they wear masks because it's not illegal for them to be there, but everybody assumes you're a prostitute if you're at the theater. So a lot of the upper class people went, but they just wore their masks so that nobody would talk. And then on the stage were nobility who were there to be seen, and they were all dressed up. They couldn't see the stage that well. They were literally on this, like if they were over here, but everybody could see them. And then in the pit were the groundlings. These were the people who paid a penny. And in the pit, you could buy food and alcohol. You could buy any of the things, including some of the other entertainments in the area. So it was rowdy. It also smelled really bad, like sweaty people without showers. And they had, instead of lovely restrooms like you have here, they had buckets sitting around. So it was rough. It was not the genteel thing some people think of when they think of Shakespeare and we're going to go be fancy and watch Shakespeare. A robust world. When Shakespeare's character asked questions, to be or not to be, hath not a Jew eyes? Is this a dagger I see which I see before me? Who does the wolf love? What cares these roarers for the name of king? Somebody in the audience would answer, to be or not to be. Do it! It was not this very polite, we're going to listen very carefully. It was an exchange. And it was welcome, and it was energetic, and this group of people had a very different point of view than this group of people or that group of people, and arguments would break out across. It's why, like To Be or Not to Be is written as a debate, because in fact, Hamlet is running a debate in the room, and people are with him or against him. But they're there, and it's vibrant, and it's exciting. A couple other things I just have to tell you. Some of the poorer theaters, not Shakespeare's theater, but they would pay to have pickpockets come. And the pickpockets would work around and then give a cut of the money they had. There were a lot of little... Do not fundraise that way, Nora. There are a lot of things like that that came out of all the years that actors were on the road and theater was illegal, that they had to learn to survive. And so this part of our journey as artists, we were still doing some of those things that were just kind of base and survival oriented. Here's what I want you to take from this. The Shakespeare that I was taught very young intimidated me. It was kind of twee, it was kind of precious, I didn't understand it, and I was a little bored by it. This was not Shakespeare's theater. Shakespeare, it was demanded that it be exciting. I recently did a King Lear at the Utah Shakespeare Festival, and preparing for it, one of the critics, Howard Bloom, wrote, as I have attended many stagings of King Lear and invariably have regretted being there. And I went into preparing to direct it with that concern. But I understood it. It's a complicated play, it's a long play, and I thought, this is one of the greatest plays ever written. It truly is. But I think we're so enamored of it as literature that we forget the blood, we forget the breath, we forget why it excited Shakespeare's period. I think King Lear is Steven Tyler or Mick Jagger. He's a rock and roll king, and he wants to keep the party going. He just doesn't want to keep doing the work. And you know what? He earned it. Everybody around him is rich because of him. And then when he turns off the money spigot, everybody turns against him. And he truly doesn't understand it because they told him he was God. That's an exciting King Lear for me. That makes sense. Why did all these people love him? He was the money spigot, but he also made the world fun. Medieval times were not that fun. That was kind of a bleak period. And if you had a guy like King Lear throwing a party, all the time, that was kind of great. I digress. I was lucky enough to have some playwriting seminars with playwright Arthur Miller. And he said one day in class that everything you need to know about playwriting you can learn in the first scene of Hamlet. And that has always rung for me as something I go back to almost any time I direct Shakespeare. I go back to Hamlet, the first scene of Hamlet. And I thought it was worth talking about today because you're doing something rotten, and then you're doing the school tour of Hamlet. By the way, Alchemy Theater, the school tours, that is planting the seeds that will be the forest of the future. When you're doing school shows, they're like the groundlings. You hope.
Yep.
And you don't know what seeds you're planting and how the world is better because you got up at 6 a.m. in the morning to do Hamlet at 8 a.m. But thank you for doing that because that is our future. So let's talk about Scene 1 of Hamlet. We're at the theater. We walked from London, a little sweaty. A lot of distractions on the way in. Everybody is talking. Sun is shining on the stage. The first thing that happens, well, there's a stage direction, and by the way, the stage directions were added. Shakespeare did not write them, but the stage direction says, enter Bernardo and Francisco, 2 sentinels. Bernardo's line is, who's there? It has to be loud because everybody's talking. The lights don't dim, nothing happens. So we know, as the director reading this, I'm like, well, if he's yelling, those 2 guys must be pretty far apart. And that sense of volume, I'm thinking, that might be like the winter wind. Because he yells, who's there? And Francisco says, nay, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself. Now that means he's probably wearing a cape. Oh, it's probably cold. It's July, but it's probably cold, or he wouldn't have to reveal his uniform. And he can't see his friend. So it's dark, they're far away from each other, the wind is blowing, and they're some kind of soldiers. There's also a promise of violence here. Remember, we got to keep the audience in the room. For a penny, they're not that deeply invested. There are other theaters. So we got to keep them from the very, very beginning. So we've established it's night, there's conflict, there's fear, it's cold. These names. You know, the great Danish name Bernardo, Francisco. What the hell's going on here? The Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kidd is the most popular. It's Cats. It's been running for 2 years. We just got the audience in here. They're not really sure what theater they're in and they don't know the title, but they know that Spanish Tragedy was really good. So we're going to start with some Spanish names, just to make sure we hook them. And they're great Spanish names. I mean, this is the thing I love about Shakespeare. Okay, it's cheap to use the wrong country to hook the audience. I get it. But he's so thoughtful. So all the characters he names in plays, he knows what they're going to do and he knows who they are, unlike the people who named you. They had no idea that this face would become Vincent Cardinal. They named me and I turned into this. Shakespeare names his characters, as all playwrights do, knowing who they are. So there's always clues. Bernardo, it's German and Latin, and the character's name means strength or bravery of a bear. You know who in the company played that role. It's the guy who looked like a bear. And he said, oh yeah, he's going to play it. And he probably played that role in every show. But he's Bernardo. And if you look at Bernardo's lines, They're all like 3 and 4 word lines. He's just gruff. He just says this stuff. So we know who Bernardo is by his name and the length of his lines. Shakespeare's going to be directing for us. Francisco, free man, not the subject of another person. It kind of fits. There's some I'm going to do what I want to do with Francisco, but, not deep, but it's there. But the Spanish tragedy, let me talk about that just a little bit, because I want you to know how it's not nice to say cheap, how commercial Shakespeare was thinking. The Spanish tragedy has a play within a play that is a trap for a murderer. Sound familiar? Hamlet, folks? There is a ghost in the Spanish tragedy intent on revenge. Shakespeare knew what elements were selling and put them in his own plays. Now today, we would think of that as some kind of it's plagiarism and it's bad. But the playwrights of that period in particular were more like quilters than they were writers. They would take a little bit of a published history, like Cleopatra coming down the Nile is lifted directly from Plutarch. Take a little bit of Christopher Marlowe's work, a little bit of Thomas Kidd's work playing down, and stitch it together in the quilt that is Shakespeare's quilt. Now, we don't say to Grandma, you're a cheating plagiarist when she makes the quilt. Well, maybe you do. It depends on your relationship. But my point is, she's chosen what material goes where. She's chosen how it's sewn together. She's chosen a new total and made the pieces her own. And that's Shakespeare's genius. The way he breathes new life into this quilt of his is so brilliant and so special that we see a different art form. And the people he was stealing from were not doing their shows anymore. It was really how it was put together. He was truly a dramatist. Okay. So Bernardo says, long live the king. Francisco says, Bernardo? Francisco says, you come most carefully upon your hour. So Francisco's been waiting and waiting and waiting. Bernardo gets there at the last minute, always just a little late. Bernardo says, 'tis now struck 12, get thee to bed, Francisco. Well, what do we know about 12 o'clock? It's the witching hour. Now, nobles probably not so worried about superstition. Gallery people, not so worried. The people who are going to walk out soonest really care about the witching hour. So when they say 12 o'clock, they go, there's going to be a ghost, there's going to be a demon, something exciting is going to happen. He's got them hooked yet again. And I love these characters. These are Bernardos and Franciscos, but they are so good to each other. 'Tis now struck 12, get thee to bed, Francisco. For this relief, much thanks. In case you didn't get the costuming, that means be quiet. 'Tis bitter cold, he says. So Shakespeare always does this. He suggests it, and then for the people who weren't listening, he just says it. Here it is. So, 'tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart. Have you quiet guard, not a mouse stirring. Such a great line. Such a great setup for the mouse trap later, the play within a play, in which we establish Claudius's guilt. Well, good night. If you do meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch, bid them make haste. Enter Horatio and Marcellus. Marcellus is a boy's name. It's short for Marcus. So we know right away that this is one of the kids. This is probably one of the boys who play the girls. It was probably double cast with Ophelia. So it's a boy. And Horatio. Horatio means timekeeper. And timekeeper is such a great name for Horatio because who's the last man standing? It's Horatio, and Hamlet says, tell my story. And so the whole play, from my point of view, is from Horatio's point of view. He wrote this play, it's Hamilton, who lives, who dies, who tells the story. Horatio, the timekeeper, tells the story. Edgar in King Lear. I think I hear him, stand ho, who's there? Again, they can't see each other. Who's there? He keeps saying, friends of the ground, liegemen to the first mention of Denmark. Liegemen to the Dane. And we just sort of slip that in, because we still want them to think we're in Spain. I'm going to jump a bunch of this. But in playing it, what happens is you get the very simple folks, and then you get Horatio. Simple folks speak in short sentences. Horatio's got long lines. So that tells me he's educated, he's got big thoughts. We find out he's a skeptic. Skipping, skipping, skipping. Oh, this is such a great device. So Horatio says, touch, touch will not appear, meaning this ghost isn't going to appear. Bernardo says, sit down a while. Nobody sits. Shakespeare does this all the time to build tension. Because if I say, stand up for me, please, and you don't, we're all like, is he gonna stand up? Is he gonna stand up? We get 5 lines before Horatio says, well, sit down. And they finally do. So again, it's like Shakespeare, the director, is just keeping the tension in the air, keeping us going. We get the story of the ghost and how we said it, how we saw the ghost, and then the ghost enters. The ghost enters. Why so early? Because we want to keep them there. Now we know Shakespeare's company had 3 sets of armor. So probably what happens is the ghost, which is a suit of armor, a guy in a suit of armor, rises out of the pit. And the groundlings go nuts. They made smoke then. They had like smoke. It was totally dangerous because it was set fire. But they probably set the fire and the smoke came out and the suit of armor came out and then walked all the way around the stage. So the groundlings are losing their minds. And then it walks off. Then we have 3 pages of exposition. But we can get away with it because they're telling the story and every once in a while they go over the audience's head. So the audience is on tenterhooks waiting for the ghost to come back. And of course he does. And then we have the confrontation with the ghost. And then we know, I'm bringing up the 3 armors because he comes walking back in. He walks off stage. Another suit of armor shows up above in the gallery. And they say, he's there. He's there. Another one up there. He's there. That one turns and goes, he's gone. So we have a magic trick in broad daylight that is making the audience lose their mind. It's like Siegfried and Roy, and we're 3 minutes in. This tells me that Shakespeare wanted it exciting. He wanted it entertaining. He wanted to make the groundlings scream. And he used this from the most simple things that he had at hand. It was taking what was there in the simplest way to tell the stories most dynamically. And as a director, that's always what I'm looking for. He stands with you, always, when you're working on his work. Pay attention to the length of the lines. He will always do the acting for you. And go back to this intention of democracy. This idea that in that theater, it was a socially, economically diverse community. The baker and the royalty, all looking at the story. They were engaged in empathy. The point was to entertain. The result was empathy, and the world was a better place for it because we understood each other as human beings. We had compassion for each other. I think there's an incredible synergy between the Alchemy Theater and Shakespeare. I read your mission statement. Alchemy Theater strives to leave the world a better place than you find it, enriching your community with accessible, quality entertainment while empowering local artists. You and Shakespeare make the world a better, magical, extraordinary place through the simplest things. The gathering together, the sharing space, common storytelling. The simplicity and accessibility of it is what puts you in line with Shakespeare, and I'm honored to be here to be part of that. Let me stop on that and say we have time for questions, because that's the other thing I was supposed to do. So yeah, anything you want to talk about, whether Something Rotten is a documentary or not, whatever, any thoughts, questions, things you'd like to share. And if you have to leave, it's okay. I know we're having a long night. Sure.
An audition question that I'm going to steal from someone else.
Sure.
How do you feel about people auditioning with material from the show that they're auditioning for?
How do you feel about people auditioning with material for the show they're auditioning for? I'd like it. I think, here's why you don't do it. If directors have a really clear idea of what they want, and you bring in your version of it and it's not what they want, then sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot. I am so excited about actors, and I trust actors, and I believe in them. And if you bring in material from a show I'm directing, then we can have a conversation, because you have a point of view about it, I have a point of view about it, and it lets me get to know you more efficiently. So, I think you kind of feel out who the directors are, and if you don't know, always just do your thing. I always think about an audition as a check-in, not like I want this job, I've got to knock them dead. No violence. I really think it's about saying, I'm a funny-looking old man. Here's my skill set. Do you need that? And if they don't, there's something else. Versus, gosh, I hope I can contort myself into something that they want so that I can get this thing, because you won't be that good at it. They won't be that happy with you. And there is something else for you. I know opportunities are scarce sometimes, but there's something coming. And I think you can trust that, and the more you trust it, the truer it is.
Thank you.
Long answer. Yes?
Speaking of auditions, as a director, do you prefer to see, do you like your actors to show you monologues or cold readings?
It depends where we are in the process. I want to see some things you prepared out of the gate, even if it's just like something on tape that you did, because I want to know when you own it, what it is. And it goes back to here's the stuff I can do.
Yeah.
The cold readings for me are more about seeing you on that material, and sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. Like I am a little dyslexic. A cold read for me is an exercise in reading, not performing. And so I'm always sort of like, I want to see strengths. I think we all get better building on our strengths. So if it's a cold read, I'm probably with people that I know can do that. Anything else?
I think it's interesting that we're back to Hamlet, that Marcellus is a child's name, and then Kenneth Branagh cast Jack Lemmon in his last role, one of his last roles, to play Marcellus in his unedited Hamlet film. And Jack Lemmon's so good, I mean, just in general, but like, and even in that, and I never even considered that that's.
Well, and I think, so just to make sure everything was heard, the comments about Marcellus being cast with Jack Lemmon, an old man in Kenneth Branagh, this is what I love about Shakespeare. It is so sturdy It is a vehicle that will take the audience where you need it to go, and you can do almost anything to it, and it's still going to tell a story. And I love that about it because it's not like this delicate thing we have to treat like it's going to break. Throw Jack Lemmon in there and see what it's like. It's not the first time the show's been performed. And, you know, that's great. That's great to me. I find some of the big, bold experiments thrilling. Coming up on Broadway, Kenny Leon is directing Jake Gyllenhaal and, oh my gosh, old man brain. Black actor, really famous, amazing.
Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington, thank you. Wow. Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal in Othello. Denzel Washington is too old to play Othello. He's a brilliant actor. It will be amazing. And his age will bring us a perspective on that character and that role and that situation that we may not have thought of. And you know what? Othello will still be Othello after that show closes. So I'm a big believer in get the intention and then bring your excitement to it. And it's often casting. I mean, I love that you do these school shows and you cut them way down and tell the story. The story's still being told. The guts of it are still there. The language is still there. That's what we do. So yeah, do whatever you want. Shakespeare will always be with us. He's a cockroach.
I have a question. So you referred to Shakespeare as sort of as a quilter in borrowing and maybe completely stealing other ideas and presenting them. Are there any of Shakespeare's plays, or is there one in particular that you find to be more specifically Shakespeare's works or his own story? Maybe some of the later works.
Yeah, you know, interestingly to me, after Hamlet died, he had twin kids, and the son died, and he had 3 kids. Hamlet, the son died. The 2 girls survived. After Hamlet died, it feels like there's a lot more authentic investigation of himself and humanity. And I don't know whether that's in the selection of his writing partners or him, but there is like the 12th Nights and those plays start feeling more of a piece and less stitched together. So yeah, that's, but you know, it's gossip through the ages. We just don't know. And I think most of you know, but Shakespeare, we didn't have his plays, and it was after he died that his company started pulling things together. So you can, like the clown Kemp, you can imagine when they said, what did you say here? And he started doing every joke he ever did in his whole career. So you have Bottom the Weaver, who's got these long monologues, and it's just because Kemp was a ham, and when they asked, it was like, oh yeah, and I said this too. So it's dodgy, and I think it's okay to know that some of it's dodgy. It makes it easier when you're cutting, because then you don't feel like you're doing a mortal spin.
Right.
You're like, yeah, King Lear shouldn't be 4 hours long.
And were the plays that long? I mean, legitimately, like, was Hamlet a 5-hour play when it
Well, you can sort of do it this way. It was probably 3 to 4 hours because of starting at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock and having to get everybody back to London before nightfall. And, you know, coming from lunch and then going to dinner afterwards. So they were probably in that. People came and went. So the other thing that I didn't talk about, but I will now, is, you know, we think it's terrible when people walk out of a show and wander around and come back. They did that all the time. People fell asleep in the theater. Like, it was a meditative experience for some of them. And I think of like a contemporary filmmaker like Tchaikovsky, who's got 45 minutes of somebody walking with a candle across a steaming pool. And that is actually written and created for you to kind of zone in and out of. And there was no shame in that. So once we got everybody in there and they were invested, some of the longer passages and things, I just think people fell asleep or walked away and then came back. They'd already committed. They were in. So a little bit of, and I have the urgency throughout. If you fall asleep in my show and I'm sitting in the audience, I am losing my mind. I don't have that, but I don't think Shakespeare was too worried about that, and that's why the length was not super problematic. And sometimes that's just process. Although I think what happened was when they gathered everybody's variations on King Lear, they put them all together.
That was it.
Yeah, and so that's why we get so much material. It's just the material that was out there to get to the final thing. Yes?
How do you feel about, or are there any guiding principles for moving Shakespeare's plays to different times and settings and, you know, that conceptualization that a lot of people do?
I think, well, first of all, I think he holds up under anything. But, like, I did a comedy of errors. It was sort of like Mamma Mia meets Comedy of Errors.
Ooh.
And it was really, really fun. And the reason I did it is because, especially in the comedies, there are so many social cultural references that are not funny to us anymore. Like, it's really current material. And if you can move it to a time where you can substitute the currency, you can capture the energy and the jokes and the sense of what Shakespeare intended, which this is funny and applies to you. So I think that helps. The Simon Russell Beale contemporary King Lear, where it was very suits and boardrooms and stuff, I think it gives you iconic clues that we understand differently when the equations are made. The other thing, truthfully, is, you know, you walk down the hall and you look at your costume stock, and you got a whole bunch of clothes from the 60s. It's going to be a great idea for this theater to set Midsummer Night's Dream in the 60s, because that's what's in stock. And it's more important to do it than to like be like, we can't do this because we can't costume the actors. So sometimes necessity is a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Anything else?
Tell us about pageant wagons. Go back to the...
Do you want me to really talk about that?
She does, I know for sure.
I'll just say this, and it may help. It may like give you permission to do something. If we look at our history as actors, performers, directors, although directors are new within the last 170 years, we spent a lot of time traveling together as family units, primarily chosen family units, and we were eating based on the success of our show in the town square or for some rich people's wedding or something. And we all kind of did everything. And that economic structure is very different than the Broadway economic structure where you go work for the man. And so our artistic DNA is about creating out of this trust and everybody contributing equally. And that feels very betrayed when somebody's making a lot more money than you are, but you contributed to the creation. I'm a big believer in Broadway, but you have to know you're going to go work in the factory now, and you're going to make factory money, and that's super cool. When they did a study on this, and they looked at theaters, and this is going to be very exciting for you guys, they looked at theaters that lasted more than 20 years. And they said, how come? And the commonality was they were structured flat, like we used to be, traveling around in our wagon. There were core members of the company who got it. They were at the center of the circle. They got the mission, they got what they do. Sometimes they couldn't articulate it, but they shared something of what this thing is. The next concentric circle were people who served the vision. They may not be the ones holding on to the vision, but they were there to support it, participate in it, and do it. Then the next concentric circle were people who benefited from the vision, wanted to be part of it, but weren't there because of the vision. And then the last circle were the people who were like picking up the garbage and delivering wood and all of that. That model is the model for a theater that lasts a long, long time. Short-term theaters are the economic model, because there's nobody at the center, nobody in the wagon who knows what it is you're doing. When I talk to you guys, you get the thing. You know what this is. You all say it slightly differently, but you all say the same thing. So I'm really hopeful for this theater. I think this alchemy, this pulling it together of meaningful communication and community is going to have legs, and you get it. So congratulations. That's it?
That's a great
All right.
one.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the attention.
Thank you, everyone, for being here for this keynote speech, and for those that attended the masterclass monologue workshop before that. Really appreciate it. Let's have another hand for Ben.
Thank you.
We want to tell everybody that we have 3 more performances of Something Rotten that are not yet sold out. Only 3. Friday, Saturday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday evening are the only shows you can still get tickets for. And then on Sunday, this Sunday the 28th, is our all-day festival day for the West Virginia Shakespeare Festival. There will be performances all day. There will be a kids workshop. There will be a fencing demonstration from Marshall University. There will be vendors all up and down the hallways. You can come and check out some cool stuff. And then we will end that evening with our final performance of Something Rotten, which is already sold out. So please join us for all those things. We want to thank the West Virginia Humanities Council for their generous grant that allows us to have these free workshops and to bring Vince here from Parts Unknown to come here and speak for us and hold these classes. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.